All right. Welcome, everyone. I think we have, it's 3 minutes on the hour, so we'll get started. My name is Lokesh Dave, and I'm very excited to be the moderator for today's webinar. I'm the founder and CEO of Enlift. For those of you who don't know Enlift, we help B2B businesses with customer acquisition needs, primarily by leveraging insights generated through big data and machine learning. I'm also joined today by Lance. Lance is the main presenter for the webinar today. Lance is the CEO of Closed Loop. It's a paid media agency that specializes in helping customers drive massive growth using online advertising. Welcome, Lance, and very nice to meet you. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me, Lokesh.
That's great. Before we get started and I hand it off back to Lance, let me share a little bit more about Enlift. Lance, can you go on to the next slide? In a nutshell, Enlift helps B2B companies with discovering customers that are likely to buy their solutions and engage with them very effectively through a multitude of channels. And let me go in a little deeper. Next slide, please. So at Enlift, we serve many hundreds of customers, from enterprises to small, medium customers. And these customers primarily leverage three main aspects of our platform. At the core is really this marketing use case of account selection for running campaigns. These could be, campaigns for, which are using email marketing as a channel. It could be using voice. It could be online ads. The goal is to be able to find accounts that match your ideal customer profile. And we enable this through a proprietary real-time database that we call Enlift Company Graph, which, in addition to having the basic firmographic information which you expect from databases like these, we have information on millions of companies around their technology adoption, their funding information, their buyer intent, and many more targeting filters. Secondly, on our platform, we have built-in predictive modeling capabilities. So this allows our platform to learn from the win-loss history of our customers. We have models which can find patterns from your existing wins, your disengagements, and then there's a feedback loop which helps the models to predict who's likely to buy your product, and the models keep improving over time. And finally, we also offer customized insights, typically used by a seller persona, down to individual account levels. This allows sellers and marketers to engage with the prospects in a personalized manner. You kind of outreach through using, again, a channel of your choice in a way which is more likely to yield results, have a warmer conversation. Next slide, please. And as a reference, I'll talk about one of our long-term customers, Microsoft, which has been using Enlift for acquiring customers for all of its cloud-based solutions globally for this small and medium business segment. This is an addressable market of tens of millions of companies worldwide, and it's obviously very inefficient to reach out to all of these companies at the same time with the same message. So over the last 4 years, Enlift has been building machine learning-based predictive models that combine Microsoft sales history with our proprietary company graph. What these models generate is a classification, categorization of the addressable market into accounts which are the best fit, and then further prioritize them with the accounts which have online buying intent, indicators of buying intent. And as a result of this, using Enlift, Microsoft's direct sales team, as well as its partner network ecosystem, is able to focus its efforts on the most promising leads. And so that's enough about Enlift right now. At this point, I'd like to switch over to the main agenda for today. And in today's world of the plentiful, there's just so much volume of data. There's so much information. There's no shortage of tools and platforms to choose from. Machine learning and AI opens up a new way of making better sense out of this data and information, and to generate better actionable insights. And at this point, I let Lance take the floor. And Lance, over to you.
Thank you, Lukesh. Pleasure being here, and thank you all for attending. Um, as Lukesh said, with the advent of machine learning, it's impacting so many different areas of our lives, and certainly as marketers, we're seeing it probably more than most. And in the work that we do at Closed Loop, on the media delivery and targeting side of things, it's really become foundational to everything we do. We've had to adapt to machine learning as it has gotten better over time and really adjust in our entire strategic approach. And that's what I want to share with you today is kind of what that looks like behind the scenes from a media management perspective. Because, as with any big changes that have come about fast, there are a lot of pitfalls associated with it. And to the extent that I can help you avoid some of those, I want to be able to do that and help you hopefully leverage some of the strengths that are available. I want to do that too. But by way of background on Closed Loop, we've been in business for about 20 years now, and media management, digital media management has been core to our business from the start. We talked about the overwhelming data available for machine learning to take advantage of, and here I am showing you a bunch of data about ourselves, Closed Loop. Suffice to say, we've been at this for a while. Paid media management is what we do, and we do it with our own technology. We do it with a high-touch staffing model, and we do it with highly experienced people. And collectively, that has allowed us to outperform the market, put up some pretty substantial growth numbers for our clients, and then compound that growth over time in a way that accrues to our benefit, and clients tend to stay with us for a long period of time. So that's Closed Loop in a nutshell. Our client list is kind of a who's who of high growth companies, and we are honored to be able to do our part to help companies like this accelerate growth and gain market share. Just to provide some proof points around that, some representative examples of some of the growth in qualified leads that we've driven for some of our B2B clients reflected here. So I tell you that not to pat ourselves on the back, but to demonstrate hopefully that we at least have some credibility here and we know what we're talking about. To the main point of today's discussion, though, why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about AI and machine learning? And I apologize, I like many people, fall into the trap of using those interchangeably, and I know I shouldn't. It's really more machine learning today. And we're talking about it because it's actually starting to work really well, certainly in our space. And I say it's starting to work because a few years ago, some of these algorithms honestly weren't very good, and we got kind of burned, and some of our clients got burned by trying to leverage some what was at the time new machine learning technologies. But in the way that machine learning works, the machines did learn, and they did adapt and improve and got better, and they're continuing to get better exponentially, as you would hope. And it's meaningful now. And so there has been this shift in the last year or two in particular on the advertising side of things, where if you're not fully leveraging the capabilities offered by these machine learning tools, you're really missing the boat. And so I want to show you today how you can take advantage of those. But just a couple of data points to help make it real for you. Google said at their Google Marketing Live event last year that they had over 3,000 engineers and researchers dedicated to AI. They had this amazing quote that's 90% of the code coming out of Google is not written by a human anymore. So they're essentially teaching their machine learning tools how to code, which is I find kind of fascinating, and if not a little bit scary as well. But they're an AI first company, and Facebook, of course, is making great strides there, as well as are many of the other advertising platforms. One of the things that we need to break away from in the ad space, though, is this historical pattern and comfort zone we've had, having a high degree of linear control over our ads, where they're placed, how much we pay, what the creative is, and so on. That's been the history really of digital advertising, is this idea that we could have such a high level of finite control over every variable. And with the explosion in the number of variables, it's just gotten to be too much to manage manually anymore. And so we need to make that shift. And what I'm seeing in the marketplace is that a lot of organizations haven't made that shift, or they're caught in this weird in-between space, and their performance is suffering as a result. And that's kind of alarming to me, and what I want to really try to address today. But really, it's just gotten to the point where you've got no choice but to leverage machine learning to be effective anymore. Google had this quote again they gave us. I don't know if I totally buy this, but they said they analyzed 70 million signals on every query in under 100 milliseconds. Again, that sounds ludicrous to me, but that they would even float it out there is kind of telling, I think, in terms of just the degree of complexity. For every auction, that's every query where they return a result and serve ads, there's an instant evaluation that sets the optimal bid, the creative targeting, and so on. And it was one thing when it was just keywords back in 2005, and then they layered on some additional levers for us to play with, where we could still manage things manually. But now with all of these different variables in play, being calculated literally on a real-time basis, we've got no choice but to take advantage of these tools. So, Google is great at doing all these multivariate calculations on millions of signals, and humans, obviously, we have trouble sometimes focusing on just one signal, right? Great old Far Side comic strip here. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we, get past it? And just by way of a little humorous aside, there's this cool tool online that is machine learning based. It says it's AI based, called InspiroBot, and you can hit this tool. It's pretty funny. It's inspirobot.me, and it'll generate all these different sayings with these background posters, kind of like the old Successory posters, if you're familiar with those. And so pulled one in here. It seemed appropriate for the times. And you can check that out for yourself. But we've got a few of these coming up later in the presentation. So I just want to set that up. I also want to acknowledge too that, some of the things that machine learning is good at, it's amazing at, but it's not great at everything. And one really funny recent example was they fed a machine learning algorithm different paint colors from the Sherwin-Williams paint sample database and asked it to come up with names for them. And for better or worse, it did. But these are not very appealing paint names. I'm driving my family nuts, actually, because every color they ask me now, what color is that? It's dope. It's dope. And Turdley was particularly bad, I thought, on that list. So they're good at some things, not good at other things. And as much as so much of the media and the hype around it, implies that, we're on the verge of machines, taking over and overthrowing humanity. The reality is that it's far less sexy than that, at least for the foreseeable future. But for people like me, and I think for Lokesh, it's a lot more fun because these are tools at our disposal that we can use to do things we couldn't have dreamed of before. So let me introduce a metaphor from an advertising perspective here. Ad targeting. If you think about all of the prospects that you want to hit, all of the qualified accounts that you want to target and get in front of, and the individuals at those accounts, think of them as stars in the sky, right? And historically, we've targeted using kind of brute force methods, right? And we've been able to kind of use these, kind of a box-based targeting approach, I'll call it, to try to capture as many qualified prospects as we can. But we've always kind of known that we were leaving money on the table, and that we weren't doing a great job of targeting all of the potential prospects out there. Of course, the vision is kind of, a perfect match, right? Laser target every individual prospect that you want to go after all the time. And that sounds good in principle, and it brings up this idea of, gosh, if the machine learning algorithms can get good enough, we can get to the point where we can introduce, what I call push button marketing. But I think that ends up being kind of a myth, even though on the surface, it seems like what we're all kind of trying to work toward, right? And so right now we're in this weird in-between phase where, it's a little better than, the boxy linear approach. It's a little more organic, and we're getting a little more quality and signal and getting better at targeting, but we're still leaving a fair amount of money on the table. And what I try to get people to understand too is that, by focusing on this galaxy, we're potentially missing the bigger picture here, in that, there's often a whole universe of potential prospects to be targeted out there. And the opportunity is often bigger than we appreciate. And if we consider that, this landscape is what it looks like for every ad channel, well, then we can consider that there's almost a multiverse of different targeting and prospecting methods available to us. But it does get multidimensional and very complex very quickly. And that's the challenge for us. So what's the right way to think about it? I don't think it's linear. I don't think it's, binary, right? There's not this, all right, it made sense to do everything manually before computing or before, machine learning, or, and now we're in the after data era. It's not that simplistic. I think from an ad and practitioner perspective, I look at it more from, all right, there was a time when it made sense for us to be control freaks and be really super hands-on and granular with how we approached ad targeting and optimization. And then there's this kind of distant future of push button marketing, right? And the reality is, we're early on in this journey, and we're in this messy in-between phase, and we're probably going to be here for a while. And it's not going to be a straight line to get to our final destination if we get there at all. And it argues for a different approach, a different mindset, I think, for how to go after these campaigns and think about it. And I call it riding the beast, riding the AI beast, right? And that is really hard as a mindset shift to make from the control freak mindset, but it's where we've got to be in order to get the most out of these campaigns. And I would caveat too that I'm not entirely sure we are going to or want to get to this ultimate destination of push button marketing. I don't know that that's the end point we should be shooting toward, but different presentation. For now, let's focus on how to ride the beast. And I think the best analog for it probably is something closer to how we think about self-driving cars and autonomous vehicles. And the Society of Automotive Engineers has put together this 5 or really 6 level continuum of how we get from no automation, full human control to full automation. And I think that our journey from an ad tech and machine learning mechanism usage ends up looking more like a progression like this. And we're probably, we're not at 0, we're not at 5, we're kind of in this messy middle, and we're gonna be here for a while. and that is what we need to figure out, is how best to deal with that. But I thought that was the best metaphor I've seen for how to deal with it. The problem is, unlike with driving, where it's the challenges are becoming more and more known, and where you've got to be right all the time. You can't afford to be wrong because you're risking people's lives. In the digital ad landscape, there's so many different other things that can go wrong, right? And in particular, your inputs can really screw things up, right? And so here's an easy example from Google themselves, where they acknowledge, oops, we had a tracking error on our end that impacted these results for a 9-day period. Been resolved, data's now correct, right? Well, what we were asking ourselves was, holy crap, what was the algorithm doing during that time? Was it making decisions based on bad data? And, we did, we kind of reverse engineered, realized there was an impact, but it wasn't all that dramatic or harmful. But we see things break all the time, and we've got to be mindful of what impact that's going to have on the algorithm making decisions based on that data. And objectives change, new products get launched, tracking codes fall off pages. We see all kinds of problems all the time. The integration with the CRM goes wrong. Data doesn't load properly. Things that you deal with all the time end up really having a major impact on things, when you've got an algorithm making decisions on that data. So let's get to the practical side of it. What can we do to really leverage machine learning? Well, first off, this might be kind of unexpected. We recommend using what we call an AI-friendly account structure. I rigged up InspiroBot here to feed us a quote. We came up with ambition is but nice. Okay, that pairs pretty well. Excellent. So InspiroBot thinks we're pathetic for even trying. Let's see. An AI-friendly structure. Again, this is a departure from the historical norm for how we manage accounts. It used to be that the highly granular account structures we used up to a few years ago, they just don't work anymore. And now what we need to think about is, instead of being super granular, how to strike a balance between relevancy on the one hand, and then giving the algorithm enough data to learn quickly so that you can get out of a learning phase. And those things are in conflict with each other, and that requires some strategic thinking and some judgment calls as to how best to structure these accounts to find that right balance point. We make that a little more real. Facebook, as recently as 2017, actually recommended a very granular account structure. But as of last year, they completely reversed course because their algorithm got so good at ad targeting that they started recommending that advertisers move away from that granular structure to a much more loosely grouped or combined structure. And the goal of that was to allow advertisers and individual campaigns to get out of that learning phase, the dreaded learning phase, as quickly as possible. Because the longer you spend in that learning phase, the worse your performance is. And on average, we say it drops performance by about 30%. So until there's enough signal for the algorithm to really optimize against, you're suffering. Your performance is going to be low. So if you're starving the algorithm of data and of the signals it needs, then you're going to see that in performance. And we see it all the time. And so you want to think about how to get to the right structure. Let me make that a little more real. One of the ways that we like to look at campaign structure is, we visualize our spend and ROI distribution, and we do it with tree map diagrams like this. And think of each box shown here as an ad set or a campaign, where the size is representative of the spend on that on that ad set or campaign, and color is the ROI. Blue is good or low cost per conversion, and red is bad or high cost per conversion, right? We run these against every campaign that we look at when we run our audits and so on, and it tells us a lot immediately. Actually, it tells us immediately about the degree of granularity. How is budget distributed? Are there a bunch of big boxes, meaning not very granular? Are there a boatload of super small boxes, meaning very tight granularity? And then what's the relative ROI distribution as well, the red and blue. So let me show you a case study. We went from a very granular structure that we had taken over when we were working with a new client. They were using single keyword ad groups, SKAGs, on Google, which is something we've moved away from, and I'll explain why coming up here. But the initial view looked like this, very granular, right? I mean, you know, it almost becomes an eye chart down here in the bottom right. And what we observed was that over half of the ad groups hadn't gotten even a click in the last 3 months, but they were actively running, right? So no signal coming from those. And of the remainder that had run and gotten a click, the vast majority of those got less than 5 clicks over 3 months, of which, again, is such a small data volume, it's hard for the algorithm to do anything with it, right, to optimize against it. So we looked at that and thought, okay, well, we're going to restructure first off and see what kind of an impact that has. So we restructured, and you can see we reduced the granularity pretty dramatically. And you know, as you can see too, we improved the ROI, more blue in general. And when we line these up side by side, it's pretty dramatic in that, you know, the granularity dropped, yes. ROI increased, yes, but what's the why, right? Well, what we proved with this was that the structure itself was too restrictive and limiting the inputs for the algorithm. It couldn't get out of the learning phase. It was always in the learning phase for so many of these ad groups or campaigns. And afterward, you know, if we draw, you know, a bar or a line around the top 70% of spend, the low performers were pushed out of those higher spend areas. And it meant that we were able to spend a majority of our budget on the highest performing campaigns, which is of course the goal. And I think that speaks to one of the easy levers that a lot of people have forgotten about is just budget allocation itself is probably one of your most strategic levers in running digital ad campaigns. And to the extent that you can make sure you're maxing your winners first before you let budget fall to your losers, you can actually help your cause dramatically. But structuring accounts in the right way is one of the key steps on that journey to make that happen. So it's for this reason really that we've moved away from tightly or very granular campaign structures entirely. And we think single keyword ad groups are actually a mistake in today's environment. So to the extent that anyone's running those, we strongly recommend against it because we've repeated this case study multiple times, taking over campaigns that had been run in this way. And we've seen dramatic improvements in results. And some people make the argument that the platforms are smart enough to aggregate results across ad sets or campaigns. We're just not seeing it play out in reality. And so, you know, we're always going to test and see what actually works. And, you know, if people want to make the academic argument, that's fine. We're going to focus on what actually works. And bottom line for us is that single keyword ad groups we're finding just don't work anymore. So it's kind of a potentially a controversial statement to make, but our lived reality is such that we're confident with that one. If you want to develop one of those tree maps for your own campaigns, we do have a tool that will do that for you. It takes about a minute or two. You just authenticate your Google account, pulls the data down, and it'll create that visualization for you, along with a couple other things. You can get that free at checkout.closedloop.com if you want to check that out. So that's best practice number one: structure for to be machine learning friendly. Number two, optimize to the right metrics. Sounds pretty straightforward. That's what InspiroBot says. InspiroBot says plan for death. Wow, dark. All right. Optimize to the right metric. Well, historically, again, you know, we had to settle for kind of what we think of as front-end metrics, right? We were in the advertising world optimizing to clicks or, you know, hopefully at least to leads or form fills or something like that. But what we really want, of course, is to optimize to business metrics, you know, these back-end metrics. And we want to get as deep down the funnel as we reasonably can. Again, finding the right balance point, though, where we've got sufficient data volume on which to make decisions and provide enough signal to the algorithm so that it can start optimizing to, you know, what really matters to you and not just these front-end kind of vanity metrics. One way you can do that is to measure a lot of different things, micro conversions, and apply a score to that, right? You can use it like a kind of a lead scoring mechanism and feed that back into the algorithm to weight your bidding and budgeting based on where you're getting the most signal and indications of value from. So that can be very meaningful, and that's something that we do with all of our clients, of course, and instrument everything together so that we can see these things. Importantly, though, the way that you make that happen is you've got to pass all that data through into your CRM usually, and your customer database, so that you can then blend it with all that front end data again later. And in the case of Google, you can do it largely by just passing the GCLID through, the Google Click ID, through storing that in your CRM. We like to store a lot of other things in with that as well, so that we can blend that data together and do our own analysis against it. But high level, this is kind of what makes it all work. You've got to be able to pass all that data through and associate it with the customer record, and do regular exports or set up an API feed back out to a tool like ours, the Forager tool, or in some cases you can pass it directly back to Google or Facebook so that they can incorporate that into the conversion metric that they're optimizing against. So Google calls it offline conversion tracking, OCT. And this starts to pave the way to really what we want to get to is always optimizing to one step deeper in the funnel as much as the data allows. And sometimes you don't have sufficient data volume to get you, statistically significant data, but you can get enough signal that you can start weighting spend accordingly. And it changes how you spend your budgets pretty dramatically. And by way of a case study on that, the stacked bar chart here shows percentage of spend by a keyword themes on a search campaign. This is before we optimized to a deeper funnel metric. We were optimizing to kind of front end lead metric for this client. And once we started optimizing just one step deeper, or two steps actually, from front end leads to SQLs, what we realized was that some of those leads that we initially thought on a cost per lead basis were just way too expensive. We realized because they were performing well on the back end for us, those, quote unquote expensive leads actually turned out to be totally worth it, and we should have been maxing them out. And so we started spending there, and it worked out for us. Likewise, some of these light blue, cheap leads, turns out we've been overpaying for them because they performed much more poorly on the back end. But until we instrumented those data streams, we didn't know that for sure. And when we aggregate all kinds of changes like that over the course of the whole account, it's dramatic, the impact that it makes. We ended up shifting our spend around dramatically. And if you can be the competitor in your space that is optimizing one step deeper down that value funnel than everybody else, you're going to run circles around them. Because what we did in this case is we left all of our competition to keep buying up those cheap leads that we knew were garbage. We paid what we knew they were worth. And at the same time, where everyone else was afraid to bid on the quote unquote expensive leads, we maxed them out. And we were just playing a different game. It became a source of competitive advantage. And that's really what the opportunity is here. So how do you actually do this? How do you change the metric that you're optimizing against? Well, it can be harder or easier depending on the platform and really the magnitude of the shift. And we ended up with kind of a natural test case actually between platforms accidentally here. We had planned out for weeks to shift the optimization metric on two platforms for one of our clients. And it was funny how this happened. It was kind of a mistake, honestly. One of our people, we planned it out, she just flipped the switch on it. And you can see immediately it worked. Cost per lead dropped immediately. Lead volume spiked. Exactly what you would hope, right? The algorithm immediately kind of looked at historical patterns, was able to improve targeting, and ROI went through the roof. Lead volume went through the roof. Everyone's happy, right? And it was literally as easy as kind of just changing the metric, flipping the switch. That's how it went on one of the ad platforms. On the other platform, not so easy. This is kind of what, riding the beast looks like, right? We turned on the automation, and it just stumbled along, and this is kind of almost our our emotional reaction as well, right? We had these highs and lows. It was a roller coaster of like, oh damn it, okay, volume's down, it's starved. All right, well, we've got to change our cost tolerances. All right, bring it back up. All right, hey, we got a little volume signal back again. No, we lost it. Oh crap, no, what's the high cost per lead? It's killing us. All right, well, let's make some other changes. Okay, well, no, that failed. Damn it. All right, well, let's try this other thing, right? So it was this a constant process of iteration and experimentation before we finally got it dialed in, and volume started to spike. That's the bars here, and cost per lead finally went down, and that's when we started to figure it out. As much as people don't want to acknowledge it, that's really what this new world looks like. Is you've got to kind of try, fail, learn, try something new, and ideally quickly. This is day by day, so that until you get to that point where the algorithm starts to figure it out and you can start to trust it. You still stay on top of it, of course. No, you don't just walk away from it. But that's the potential. And you can see the volume potentials are just massive once it starts to figure it out. All right, so that's number 2, optimize the right metric. Number 3, creative fit. Let the AI determine the creative fit. Let's see what InspiroBot says. All you need in order to create a masterpiece, the breadth of chance and the truth. Wow. I think that is not making my point. Don't let the AI determine the creative fit. That's really, really funny and really, really horrible. Okay. Responsive ads as representative of letting the machine learning algorithm generate your ad creative for you. Google and Facebook both have this, and with the advent of these, so-called dynamic ads, there's no such thing as a winning ad anymore, which is very frustrating to the control freaks. But what it means is that we are seeing custom, personalized results for every user. It can be different one to the next. One person, sitting in one office, is going to see something different than the person in the office right next to them, based off of what the platforms know about the individuals. So the way to think about that, just by way of this example with responsive ads from Google, is instead of writing up one ad or a set of ads and fixing those, you provide multiple inputs, multiple headlines, multiple descriptions, plus obviously your destination URL. The machine learning technology does its work, puts together the combination that it thinks is going to work best for that user at that time on that device and so on, in that location, and then looking at all the variables that it knows about. So now you've got to think totally differently, rather than lovingly handcrafting every ad variant. You've got to come up with all these different variables that hopefully work in concert with each other. You got to think much more strategically about it than you have in the past. And the way it plays itself out is, same keyword in this example, applicant tracking system, and 2 different ads. And because it knows that people are at different stages of the sales funnel. And so you don't worry as much about these small nuances anymore. You worry more about the strategic messaging and thinking about, how do I write ad copy in a way that appeals to people at different levels of the organization, different stages of the buying funnel, different modalities and personality types potentially. It gets to be really fascinating and kind of fun from a psychological perspective, but it is very different than how we've done things historically. Inside tips, if you're going to use these responsive search ads, and we recommend you do, because they work, and it's something that's the platforms really are pushing heavily on, and they kind of, this is one of the ways that they kind of put their thumb on the scale and get you to do what they want you to do, in that adding these improves your quality score, which improves your economics of your campaigns. We're also seeing it increase the volume potential. We're seeing that more and more inventory is available for advertisers that are leveraging these dynamic ads formats as well. So you're really missing out and kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you're not taking full advantage of these new capabilities. So you want to serve them up in really every campaign. And instead of getting reports back on which ad performed best, you get this combination report back now that shows, hey, here's kind of the top served ones, right? That yes, are indicative of which ones are performing best, but you never know which person's going to see which ad when, where, and so on. So you do get some signal, and that's a departure. There was an outcry initially because they didn't provide this at first, but they realized they needed to give at least some sense of what people were seeing out there. So you do get some sense for what things look like. At the end of the day, what's the impact of adopting this? And we just saw a massive increase when we ran the old style expanded text ads against the responsive search ads. Click-through increased by 50%, which is just astronomical. Conversion rates were up 70%, and cost per acquisition was down 60%. I mean, just, so it's not a minor change when you really figure out how best to leverage these things. It's massive. And that unlocks so much additional potential for you if you can drive your costs down. Again, it becomes a source of competitive advantage. You are able to pay less than your competitors for that same traffic, those same leads. Now you freed up budget to go out and get that much more. It really puts you into a virtuous cycle. So overall best practices for AI, talk through structure in general, keep match types together. We used to separate those out. Structure things so that you're thinking about the volume potential from the start and providing enough signal to the platforms to be able to optimize against. Optimizing the right metric, it's pretty straightforward. Mechanics are a little funny, but it's just critical to get right. Just talked about the creative. Audiences is something we haven't talked about, but there's tremendous targeting potential to layer audience targeting into different types of campaigns and spend your budget that much more intelligently. And it starts to really overlap with some of the work that Enlift does. If you can enrich your targeting with some data on your accounts and leverage some ABM style targeting, it can be insanely powerful. We're seeing amazing results from layering audience targeting on top of our existing campaigns. So push button marketing, is that where we're trying to get to? Is that where we really want to end up with? I look at that red button and it reminds me of Hal from Space Odyssey. And I don't know that it's what we want to do. I think it's kind of dangerous. I think we want to find the right blend, the right combination of human plus machine, because the machines are very good at certain things and not so good at other things. So let's figure out how to get the best of both and really, think about how we can just move together and evolve together that much more quickly. And from a time utilization perspective, used well, it can just be so powerful because we don't want to spend our time on bid management and manual reporting, for God's sakes. But that's the reality for a lot of advertisers today. It's where they're having to spend a lot of their time. And the vision that we want to get to in terms of how we're allocating time is on let us, the humans, work on the more strategic, the more creative side of things, and let the machines do those tasks that they're better at. That's the argument, and that's what we're trying to move to as an agency. But it has really required a mindset shift. And so, it's too simplistic to think that we're going to have this push button world where AI will replace the marketers. But our approach is that marketers who use AI will replace those who don't. So that is bringing the presentation to a close. I do want to let everyone know that we do these custom campaign audits. If there's interest, we develop a number of different data visualizations, look at data in kind of unconventional ways, and package that up and present it to people so that they can use it to help improve their performance and get the most out of these ad channels. Typically, our audits reveal upside in somewhere in the 35 to 100% range. And we provide a prioritized set of recommendations against those for how you can pursue that upside available to you. And with that, Lokesh, you have an offer for people as well, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Lance. That was a very very educational, very informational presentation for me personally. For the attendees, if you would like to learn more about Enlift, we would love to talk with you. Please reach out to us and please mention the closed loop webinar and we'll have a special offer for you, as you can see. Thank you.
Excellent. And I see we've got some time for Q&A, and I see we've got a couple questions that have come in as well. See if we can jump in there. From Rachel, regarding AI-friendly account structures, what type of spend per impression volume is needed to provide enough data for machine learning to make an impactful difference in campaign performance? It's not really spend or impression based. I would say it's more conversion based. At minimum, I think we said, I want to be consistent here. What did I say back here? Oh my gosh, there we go. Enough conversion per ad set, 50 per ad set per week on Facebook or 10 per ad group on Google. That's kind of the benchmark we've set for volume to allow the algorithms to get enough signal to be able to optimize against. So it's less about spend and more about the conversion side of things on that question. One other question, when running campaigns, are you solely recommending responsive search ads at this point, or do you also use extended text ads? Yeah, great question. We're doing both, and monitoring performance and trying to weight spend accordingly. It's an additional lever for us. There's certain inventory where RSA tends to work better. There's other inventory or placements where extended text ads seem to work better, and we don't want to miss out on anything. And we do want that point of comparison as well. So we're recommending running both extended text ads and responsive search ads in the same ad groups on Google. Let's see, another question. I'm really interested in improving my ABM campaigns. How can we leverage account data to get better results from my outreach? Ooh. Well, I mean, Lokesh, you're welcome to jump in here too. For us, we, you can do straight ABM targeting on LinkedIn for certain, and then you can do what we think of as ABM-like targeting on Google and Facebook. You can't necessarily target by company or employer as cleanly as you can on LinkedIn, but there are other kind of proxy targeting methods you can use, forms of audience targeting that get pretty darn close. And then you can layer in some ABM targeting for other display and video campaigns. Certainly, we've done that for a number of clients. But any thoughts from you on that, Lokesh?
Yeah, for us, for a lot of our customers, when they're looking at ABM, it does tend to go beyond online ads as well. So using email campaigns and so on. So maybe a little bit more broader perspective. But typically, what we find is ABM starts really with understanding your ideal customer profile and being able to describe your ideal customer profile in a as reliable way as possible. And this could be through granular selection of criteria with kind of the platforms like the one we offer, and or combining that with learning from your history in your CRM. So by learning from your existing customers and the common patterns between them. And so we find is a combined approach there, combining your sort of business understanding, your understanding of the market, your product, your customers, along with what machine learning models are able to find from looking at your history, has provided the best results. And then the output of that can feed into different channels, including online ad campaigns.
Got it. All right, thanks. On on that topic of ABM, we were talking a little bit beforehand, Lakesh, and I know that Enlift enables people to do a much more effective job at account selection up front. But you mentioned too that you have an integration with BlueKai, the Oracle platform, to enable you to actually target ads as well. Do you have clients who are using not just BlueKai, but any other platforms for ad targeting to those accounts?
We do. Our typical customers tend to be investing in running outbound campaigns, and as I mentioned earlier, it tends to be a mix of email campaigns, voice, as well as online ad campaigns. Within online ad campaigns, we do have integration with BlueKai. You're able to leverage insights from our company graph in building your audiences within BlueKai. They're kind of white labeled as BlueKai filters. But if you want to target organizations based on usage of technology, for example, if you wanted to build an audience of companies which are heavily using a CRM or a specific type of CRM, then we provide information and intelligence within the BlueKai platform to enable that. I would say probably one of the most common platform for our customers, and so keep in mind we work primarily with B2B companies. We see LinkedIn as a very common platform, and being able to take our account selection sort of criteria accounts and then create a matching audience within LinkedIn's platform and building lookalike models on LinkedIn.
Got it. Yeah, and we do similar with Google and with Facebook, and we've been pleasantly surprised really by how much better the lookalikes and similar audience targeting has gotten over time on both of those. So I think this idea of kind of combining what Enlift does with identifying the accounts that you should be targeting as part of an ABM campaign, and then marrying that up with ad targeting, and then identifying the right message too. I mean, I did a little research on Enlift, and I'm really intrigued by that. I mean, can you speak to how you go about making recommendations about the type of outreach to conduct, and what works with different contacts or different companies?
Absolutely. Let me actually relate this back to one of the slides which you had, which I really liked, which was around, the maturity of the self-driving sort of, from no automation to full automation, different levels within that. And I think you highlighted in your opinion where you feel things are somewhere in the middle, right, for kind of the space you are in. And I tend to agree. And within that, we have, I would say, two options where we are able to provide personalized recommendations down to an account level when you're reaching out, trying to have a conversation with a prospect. One of them is more towards, I would say, it's driver assistance or partial automation, and the other one is where we have higher automation there. So the two ways we are able to provide recommendations, a simple example is, let's say you have a product which has an integration with 3 different systems, and you have a white paper for each of them or a case study for each of them. Mm-hmm. Our platform allows you to see which of these integration this platform is present within the prospect's environment. So when you reach out to them, instead of sending them 3 links, you talk about the very specific platform they are using and how your integration really generates a lot of value. for that use case. So you're going down and having a more warmer conversation by highlighting a specific, again, use case of the prospect. So that's one example. The other example is we have a customer which has a very broad product portfolio, a lot of surface area, and they have 18 different feature scenarios within the product. And we use machine learning based on a prospect's background, based on who they are, what products they're using, how mature they are. We are able to learn which scenario resonates the best with them. And that means sending them the right collateral, sending them the right link to a video or the right slide deck or the right pitch point. And that's something which is highly automated and relies a lot on learning from high volume of history over time.
Excellent. Great, thank you. Lokesh, I see we did get an additional question come through. It said, it's from JC. Said, you said that the SCAG approach, the single keyword ad group approach, was no good. The case study showed nice results when you compared SCAG approach to machine learning approach. How many times have you done this comparison with clients, and do you never use SCAG now? That's correct. We never use SCAG now. And that is a departure for us. We made that shift a number of years ago. And we have taken over campaigns that have been managed with SCAGs multiple times now, gosh, at least 4 or 5 times in the last couple of years. And we've seen that same pattern repeat itself. And it's been kind of surprising to us. We thought, hey, are there scenarios where this still makes sense? And I think there probably are 1 or 2. I think maybe super high volume, super high SKU e-commerce might make sense in some cases, but to do at least some of it that way. But for us, for the most part, yeah, we never use SCAGs anymore, just because we've had this repeated experience where the machine learning structure, in our case, it's been superior every time. We've tested it out. I mean, we've kind of done the side by side, yeah. So we're not using SCAGs at all, to answer that. And I think we're up on the hour now. So want to be respectful of everyone's time, and to the extent you're going to get lunch or got another meeting coming up, we'll let everyone go. But Lokesh, thank you so much for the opportunity to present with you, and I've really enjoyed it.
Likewise, Lance. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.